Since there are people here who are familiar with art history, so let's use for fun some art history. 14th century, Florence, Italy, right? So the famous Medici family, the main sponsor of art, literature, poems, and much more. And one of the famous accomplishments is the building of that huge ribbed the top of the main building at the Florence, that to this very day you see it. But the story goes that this extremely wealthy Medici family obviously have other families who oppose them, and this is 14th century. So Cosimo, which was the main philanthropist, the benevolent individual that took care of all these community needs, art needs, expanded throughout Europe, but particularly in Florence, he was forced by his enemies to jail. They tried to many times to avoid his actions, even it was a philanthropic art. So the idea is eventually he was able to, in those days, to pay off and to get away from prison and to sponsor those projects. So here we talk about situation of a fellow that is a very violent and people afraid of him. And as a result, you see a situation that, let's use name, Levi, individual by the name of Levi, he signed a contract that he basically bought a property from Shimon, and Reuven is like the witness, the signing witness, but then Reuven claimed that this is my estate. And it turns that Reuven used Shimon in order to have, because Levi forced him out of his estate in such a violent way that Reuven have no choice but to sign that paper. Yet Reuven has two witnesses or promissory note or other documentation that prove that he is the real owner. So here we have a situation that Reuven demanded to have his estate, and Levi said it was his estate, but he was a co-signer to transfer it to me. Right? And that's just one of the discussions. The first discussion is going to be a disputation, painful disputation in the family. You have a husband and wife, but not yet a husband and wife. They just betrothed. For example, he gave her a ring, he said, you become my wife, but they are not married yet. In those days they used to have stages. And part of the agreement was a certain sum of money as a dowry that her father was committed. The father did not follow his commitment. So therefore the question is, can the groom said, I'm not marrying her? By saying so, she's stuck because she is in one way committed herself, engaged with that person. On the other hand, he said, if your father is not going to pay what it's promised, I'm not going to marry you. And what do? How you treated this type of situation? On one hand, you do not want her to be stuck for life. On the other hand, the young man said, I have here a commitment from your father. It's a matter of fact that someone I know years back, 30 years ago, he basically engaged with someone in Yerushalayim, and it was promised to him an apartment in Yerushalayim. And then he find out after the engagement that they put the apartment on the grandfather's name instead of the soon-to-be couple's name. And he abrogated the engagement. There was a lot of tears from her. And a week before the scheduled wedding, they went to the attorney and switch it on this couple name, and that settle things up. And in my best knowledge, they're still married 30 years later, but the point is, you see here this type of disputation, this type of commitment that carries a lot of weight. So today we're going to study page 109. We'll start at the Mishnah on the bottom of 108b. הפוסק מעות לחתנו ופשט לו את הרגל. The father-in-law committed himself to a dowry, but then unfortunately he went bankrupt. What does that mean, went bankrupt? So in the interpretation, there are about at least five I know, of interpretation of pshitat regel, literally meaning he went and pushed his foot out. One interpretation is the Meiri that said that the expression of death, like you use the term, he kick his bucket, right?
Bucket, yeah.
All right. Another one is derision, meaning the Rashi have it two different ways, but the Rivan tells us that you can take my food, but I do not have any money to give you. Or Rashi said that stretch his leg to the other and says, take the mud off the sole of my foot. It's a form of hanging. Hang me over the tree by my foot. I cannot give you anything. So the idea is, in short, in so different interpretation, is the idea that the father-in-law cannot follow up his promise. So what do? 109, Teshev ad shetalbin rosha. The first view is she will stay in her father's house until her head turns white. What does that mean? He already said, Arayat mekudeshet li, you become my wife, and betrothed you. So now she is in a limbo. He is not kones, he is not marrying her, and he's not megaresh, he's not divorcing her. Now the idea the Rambam explained to us is that usually there is a time frame, and the husband cannot postpone the marriage more than a certain period of time. That's the Mishnah tells us on page 57. But here the problem is it was all conditional, meaning the man said, I am going to marry you on the condition that your father is going to give us a townhouse or apartment or car or money or whatever it is. It was a dowry agreement, and since the father did not follow up, she is stuck. So that's one view. Admon Omer, however, Admon disputed, and he said, Yecholai shetomar, she can come out and said, Ilu ani pasakti le'atzmi, eshev ad shetalmin roshi. If I was the one who committed myself to you, I understand why I'm stuck, because I did not follow my promise. Achshav she'aba pasak. But now you understand that it wasn't me, it's my father who committed himself to that monetary payment. Ma ani yechola la'asot? Why you are not marrying me? Because my father did not pay. Or knos, or ptor. Why I need to be punished? Either you're going to marry me, or give me a get and release me. אמר רבן גמליאל, רואה אני את דברי אדמון. He said, I see as correct the statement of Admon. So what you see here, you see here a disputation. Soon you see the details of the event. It's not as simple as one may think that is just a personalities, because it's a potential to have a happy marriage. It's just monetary disputation, but we need to dig in to understand what's the dynamics, why she's stuck and he's insisted in all this manner of behavior. in general, we want to see everything peacefully, nicely, and lovely. But if you remember, when we studied page 102, it was a statement, hen hadvarim, which means when it's come to shidduch, to a form of a commitment, marriage commitment, it's like a kinyan, a manner of transactions, which means the father is involved here. How? So let's see, for example, Tosfot. Just few lines. Piresh Rashbam, top of page 109. דאמר רב גידל בריש הנושא, עמדו וקידשו, כנו, הנמלה דקידשו מיד מתוך התנאי או לאחר זמן, והזכירו התנאים בשעת קידושים. אבל יתנו עתה וקידש לאחר הזמן, ולא יזכירו התנאים לדברים הנקנים באמיריים. So there is a concept in this Tosfot and many other Rishonim. If you have Maaseh Kinyan, if you have the manner of agreement, let's say a man, let's call him name, Michael. He engaged with Debbie. Engagement. Gave a ring or whatever, all the manner of engagement. And the premises of that engagement was the father is going to find them a housing. And now they schedule a wedding date and he cancel it. But they don't break up, in a sense. He cancel it. The problem is that she is already engaged, meaning in some form of a religious law she is married. And he said, as long as your father is not follow up, it's not going to happen. Right? So now we need to zoom in to understand the whole circumstance. Matnitin delo k'atanya detanya. Amar Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, לא נחלקו אדמון וחכמים על הפוסק בעוד לחתנו ופשט לו את הרגל שיכולה להשתמר רבא פסק עליי מה אני יכולה לעשות. We have no disputation here if it was a total father's commitment, that she is total, nothing to do with that. Meaning the father, they went to his business, he commit himself, he's not follow up, she is not guilty of that, alright? על מה נחלקו? What's the really disputation in the Mishnah? Let's see what's involved here. על שפסקה היא על עצמה. She committed herself to that. Which means upon the engagement she committed herself to come up. For example, let's talk practically. They want to move to Boston and they need $150,000 for a townhouse. And he said, I'll come with a down payment of, for example, $35,000, and Michael engaged with Deborah, and then he went to all the bank's paper, and she basically signed up with him for the mortgage. But then when it's a physical check that need to produce, they gave $1,000 the first stage. Now they need to come up with another $34,000 in order for the bank to loan you the rest. She basically is out. Why? שחכמים רואים את השב עד שתלבין ראשה. The sages said, as long as she's not follow her promise, he is not obligated to marry her because that was the precondition agreement between the two. Alright? אדמון אומר יכולה היא שתאמר, אדמון says she can hold the claim, כסבורה אני שאבא נותן עליי. When we engaged and I participate, when you put $1,000 out of your pocket and I commit myself for another 34, it was in a condition that I have such a relationship with my father, and I was sure that my father is going to back me and give me the $34,000. Whatever it is, you have a saving account, whatever it's involved. Right? ועכשיו שאין אבא נותן עליי. Now daddy decided not to give. It can be a million reasons. He don't like you, or you have an issue with the family, he has an affair, who knows what. He is not following his promise. I'm stuck. I committed myself on the premises that my father told me that he will back me. Alright? So, מה אני יכולה לעשות? What do you want from me? What should I do now? Now, you don't want to get married? Fine. או כנוס, או פטור. either you divorce me now, or you marry me as is. And you lost $1,000, the bank will not give you back, or maybe you can get it back, but the plans change. אמר רבן גמליאל, רואה אני את דברי אדמון. He says, I see the word of Admon as the true decision. So here you see a matching, the Rif said, between the Braita and the Mishnah. But then the Braita limited this statement, and they said, Tana, במה דברים אמורים? בגדולה, אבל בקטנה כופין. You have to differentiate between a young girl that is a spendthrift, that is irresponsible with commitment, she doesn't know what she's doing, she will get high in love and she's all mixed up, or adult, mature decision that have maybe even source of income. Kofin lemai, when we say that we enforce here, ilei male'av, ipcha mibaele. Right? So if it's, you tell me that you enforce the father, you take the father, you sue him to a Beth Din, right, the mini court, and they go and enforce him to follow that, so that's understandable when it's come to an adult, mature daughter, right? And not a minor. Why? Because obviously minor, it's meaningless. You know, she doesn't have a sustainable income, she doesn't always in a position that she can make commitments. אלא מרא והכופין לבעל ליתן גט. So here you see already the deepest meaning, that it's most probably is not going to be a healthy marriage, right? They're not yet even in a manner of living together, and look what's going on. But any case, follow the dry law, you enforce this husband to give her a get, and let each of them departed to their own destination. אמר רבי יצחק בן אלעזר משמי דחזקיה, כל מקום שאמר רבן גמליאל רואה אני את דברי אדמון, הלכה כמותו. So he said, any time that I see a statement of the leader of the sages, Rabban Gamliel, I see the statement of Admon, it means that the halakha, the Jewish law, follow with his view. So it means all these three rulings that we study on this page and the previous page, they are all, when Rabban Gamliel said, I see the statement of Admon, it means it's following. But soon you see that there's one that it's not. אמר לרבה לרב נחמן אפילו בברייתא, even in the Braita, the one who said that even she ruled for herself, the husband cannot delay her, he either marry her or divorced her. So they said, אמר לי, רב נחמן said, מי כאמרין במשנה, בכל מקום שאמר רבן גמליאל, כאמרינן. So it means, even in the Braita. אמר רבי זרע, אמר רבא בר ירמיה, שני דברים שאמר חנן, הלכה כיוצא בו. 2 points that Hanan said, you go by the halacha with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who agreed with him. 7 דברים שאמר אדמון, אין הלכה כיוצא בו. The 7 point, the 7 statement that Admon said, the halacha is not follow his ruling. So they said, Maika Amar. So Kayotzebo is like Hanan match Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Maika Amar, Ilei Machik Amar Shne Dvarim Shamar Hanan Alacha Kemoto Vechayotzebo, which means that the Ritva said that the halacha follow him because he have another one that supported his view. ושבעה דברים שאמר אדמון אין הלכה כמותו ולא כיוצא בו. והאמר, you see a clear statement, רבי יצחק בן אלעזר משמי לחזקיה, כל מקום שאמר רבן גמליאל רואה אני דברי אדמון הלכה כמותו, which means, so at least part of the ruling of Admon, we follow halacha to his view. So they said, אלא אחי כאמר, שני דברים שאמר חנן הלכה כמותו וכיוצא בו, שבעה דברים שאמר אדמון, אין הלכה כיוצא בו, כמותו הלכה בכולו. Which means you follow אדמון in all the 7 ruling. ואמר רבי יצחק בן אלעזר משמי דחזקיה, כל מקום שאמר רבן גמליאל רוני את דברי אדמון הלכה כמותו, אמר אין, לא אמר לא. If he said the statement yes, the halacha is follow his ruling, but in a situation that Rabban Gamliel said no, it's not said the statement no, the halacha is not according to the view of the Admon, אלא אחי כאמר, שני דברים שאמר חנן הלכה כמותו וכיוצא בו. 7 דברים שאמר אדמון, יש מהם שהלכה כמותו ויוצא בו, ויש מהם שהלכה כמותו ולא כיוצא בו. Which means sometimes yes, sometimes not, which means sometimes רבן גמליאל and like חזקיה, בכל מקום שאמר גמליאל רואה אני דברי אדמון הלכה כמותו, אינך לא. So they said that any place that Rabban Gamliel said, I see as corrected statement of Admon, the halacha is follow him. The other cases, Rabban Gamliel remained silent, indicating that he did not agree with him. The halacha is not according to the Admon. Now we're going to the Mishnah, dealing with people who are very demanding, pushy, forceful, violent people, unfortunately, that we have to deal with in life. So here we have a situation of 3 men, let's call him names. Levi, he selling estate to Shimon. Okay? Reuven is the witness, the signer of the sale. Reuven taking Levi to court, and he said, it's mine, it's not yours. Why? Reuven has 2 witnesses, or a promissory note, or other documentation that it's his. Levi said, it's mine. Reuven said, he is a guy that's going violence, and he forcefully forced me to do this. It is true that I sign, but because he's so violent, he forced me to that situation to sign, but it's actually mine. Right? It happens in life. How many times I heard recently of a fellow that have a lot of issue with self-confidence. So what happened is his boss forced him to make statement to her boss about her doing things, etc., etc. And that boss was very verbally abusive to that employee. And when that employee followed my advice and went to the boss of his boss, that person find out and called him to her office and said, you know, I heard that you complain about me, I don't know how we can rectify our relationship. And he called me on the phone and he was crying, he says he's petrified. I said, I think the opposite. I think it's like, imagine if you have a husband-wife, for example, and she was in abusive relationships. And one day the husband went to his health club, and one of his friends said, I heard that you are, mean to your wife. And as a result, he comes home and he says, how dare you to tell what's happening to my friend, right? But from that day onward, he was careful with her, right? So I said to that person, that abusive language has to stop somehow. You can't complain to me all the time that your boss is verbally beating you up, and she get away with that. It can't go on. Oh, I'm afraid maybe. I said, you have a contract. You're not going to lose the job, and she will learn a lesson. So here you have this guy Levi, who is everyone afraid, right? So he forced this guy to sell and to sign a paper. And now Reuven gets some confidence and let's take him to the court and says, all this sale is not valid, right? Let's read the Mishnah. Ha'orer al השדה, One who contests ownership of a field, claiming that the field under the control of someone else actually belongs to him. Who, and he himself, right? This guy Reuven, Chatum alea be'ed. He is signing on that contract with the witness, right? That he sold the estate. Sounds crazy, right? But that's the reality of life. You have this mafia or these people or these mean individuals, including judges, right? That can be corrupted. You see the book of Ruth, right? The days of the judges judge, right? Can be corrupted too. Admon said, when he signed that agreement, it's not because he agreed that his estate. He says, Hasheni noach li, והראשון קשה ממנו, because he is so violent, right? והחכמים אומרים, איבד את זכותו. The sages said, no, he lost his right to contest ownership. He signed his bill of sale, it's over. Isn't that terrible? Imagine if it's a state, and for example, you have two neighbors, and one neighbor forced the other to move the boundaries. He have some trees in between. And he forced him to sign. And it was against the neighbor's will. Right? So he said, Asa'a siman le'acher, איבד את זכותו. If he established the field as a marker for another field, everyone agreed that he lost his right. This is just the idea that you have this documentation that the boundary marker, it's written that they belong to someone else. So even Admon concedes that he lost his right, because he had no reason to say that it belonged to someone else other than his belief that it was a fact in case. You know, for those who are here earlier, I brought example of 14th century art history, the story of Florence. You know that story, right? So the story how the Cosimo Medici, when he built all those places, so there are some others who basically forcefully try to put him in a situation that he wasn't able to follow. Eventually to set it out, but you have this type of behavior of people. Anyway, Amar Abaye, lo shanu ela ed. He says that applies only with regard to witness who sign on the bill of sale. Aval dayan lo ibed et zchuto. A judge who contesting the ownership of a field and at the same time set on the court that certified the bill of sale for every tract of land, he has not lost his right. So one of the way the Gemara is said in Gittin, page 3, that the witness testify that their signatures, and then Beit Din approve it. So if Reuven is one of the judges that approve, so his signature is not considering admission that he owns the estate. The Tane Rabbi Chia, אין העדים חותמים על השטר, אלא אם כן קראוהו. The witnesses do not sign the document unless it's clearly read, because it's written that that they come to testify, and the only condition is that they knew what is written there. 109b, Aval dayanim, but when you have a judges that chotmin, that they sign this note, this document, af al pi shelo kra'u, even they don't read, because they do not have to be involved with the essence of the documentation. So the signature of dayan, of a judge, it's is not any mean of admission of the content of that documentation, asa'ah siman le'acher, but if establish a field marker for another one, that's the end of the Mishnah, so he lost his right, that's everyone agreed. אמר רבי לא שנו אלא לאחר, אבל לעצמו לא איבד את זכותו. It all depends. For himself, no. For someone else, that's different. דאמר, אילו דלא אביד אחר, if I didn't do it, meaning if I did not kept quiet, לא אבה מזבן לניאלי. He will not sell the estate of my neighbor. מה יתלך למימר? What do you have to say? איבא לממסר מודעה. So if I need to tell in secret to a witness, and I say that I basically disagree with ownership of this field, the only reason I'm doing that is because if I go public, he will not sell me that field. חברה חברך יתלך וחברה דחברה חברה יתלה. You have a friend, and the friend is a friend, almost like Facebook, right? So I was afraid that these witnesses will tell others, right, to other friends, until the salesperson will know about it, and therefore he will refuse to sell me that estate. So because, according to his view, he cannot express his rejection and say that this field is belong to him, so he'll not lose his right of refusal. So here is the story. Hahu de asa'ah siman le'acher. It was one individual. He has a clear marker of another field, so meaning that it's written for someone else. Ir'er ushchiv. So he contested the ownership, and then he passed away. Ve'okim apotropa. He appointed someone to be the guardian for the orphan. Ata apotropus lekamei de Abaye. So the guardian came before the great Rabbi Abaye to contest it for the sake of the orphan. Father claimed that it's his. Amar lei, Abaye rejected that, said, Asa'ah siman le'acher ibed et zchuto. Says the deceased established the field as a market for another, so he lost his right to contest ownership of the land. Amar, so the guardian said to Abaye, Ihava avuhon diatmei kayam, if the father of the orphan were alive, Hava ta'in ve'amar, he will claim and said, Telem echad asiti lecha. I have one furrow for you. The marker I established by means of the field was not meant to the entire field, only the far off edge of the field. Amar lei Shapir ka'amar, the Amar Rabbi Yochanan, im ta'ana ve'amar, if the one who contested come out with claim and said, Telem echad asiti lecha, I put a furrow for you, then that's basically the borderline. So they said, Ne'eman, we believe him, we take his credit. So since the father is no longer among the living, and he claimed that he may have, it's accepted for his heir. So they Zil havlei mihat. So now you have to go and give him the furrow anyway. Telem echad havalarich badediklei. So that furrow, there was a row of a palm tree. So they said it's like a very it's a line of palm trees over there. So the guardian didn't want to give away that part. Amar le ihava avuhon diatmei kayam. If the father of the orphan was alive, ta'in ve'amar, he may come and claim and said, חזרתי ולקחתי ממנו. He said, I went back and brought it from him. אמר לי, שפיר כאמרת. He said, you spoken well. דאמר רבי יוחנן, רבי יוחנן said, אם טען ואמר, חזרתי ולקחתי ממנו נאמן. If the claimant went back and said, I brought it for him, he is credible. Because we have the rule, הפה שעשה הוא הפה שהתיר. The mouth that permitted is the mouth that prohibited. Now, אמר אביי, היימן דמוקים אפוטרופה נוקים כי היי. דיידה לאפוחי בזכותה דיתמי. He said, the one who appoint a steward should appoint someone to be his person because he know how represent the orphan properly. So in general, you go by the Bet Din. So they should go for this poor orphan. But it may happen that the judge, since there are so many cases, they will not remember all the details. So it's good to have this guardian. So he knows what is good for those orphans. That's the way Tosfot explained to us. The fourth ruling of Admon is, Mishalach, that's the Mishnah, Mishalach למדינת הים ועבדה דרך שדהו. So someone goes in the, overseas, and meanwhile the path leading to his field was lost, which means taken over by the owner of the field. So that's typical. Again, I'm using friend's example. I have a friend that he bought a house, which is rare in Israel, not apartment, house, in the newly development in those years called eastern part of Pisgat Ze'ev, which is a neighborhood in Yerushalayim. So he came back to the state, he was sick, etc., etc. When he came back, he noticed that builders all around him took away the entire view. He wasn't around, he wasn't contested in the court. It's not just that, they use the pipeline, the water line, it's everything and anything. He's tried to contest it. Some part he was good and some part is not. For example, the part was built in both sides of his house, which take part of his garden, was taken in a violent way, and since it was already building, he couldn't contest it, he wasn't there. So you see here how serious is the idea of someone who's overseas and he cannot control. Admon omer yelech lo bakatzara, which means even the other one unhappy, he can use the shortcut, like transpassing, but he should select the shorter cut, even against those neighbors. והחכמים אומרים, יקנה לו דרך במאה מנה או יפרח באוויר. He should either pay, or they use a term that let him fly through the air, which means basically he lost that path because the Tosfot said he's not recognized it. He that's what happened. You go overseas, you go for a long time, you come back, it's a total different story. Ma'ita Amad Rabbanan. What's the reason of the sage that disputed Admon? Shafir ka'amar Admon. See, we have to run. Okay. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, כגון שהקיפו ארבעה בני אדם ארבעה רוחותיה. His situation is that you have four corners. It's belonged to more than one person, and each of them rejected with the claim that, that his portion is the belong to the other. אי אחם היית עמד אדמון, אמר רבא, בארבעה דעתו מכוח ארבעה. Which means that was 4 sales for 4 buyers. וארבעה דעתו מכוח אחד, כולי עלמא מצאי דמדחלי. If the 4 came from one, each of them can say that the path did not pass for his part, but the part of his neighbor. כי פליגי באחד דעתי מכוח ארבעה. אדמון סבר מכל מקום דרכאית לקבח. I have a path toward you. ורבנן סברי, אי שתק, so if you keep quiet, I'll sell it in the normal market price. V'lo, if you demand that I'll give you for free the path, I'll return the ownership to the document the promissory note to the original owner, and then it will be abrogation of the sale, and all this field returned to the original owner. And you cannot fight with the original owner, because each of them will throw the case to the other. Hauda Amartlu is a story that someone said at the time of he is about to pass, Dikla Lebrat, one of the palm tree should be handled to my daughter, but he didn't say which one. So the orphan came, they divided the estate, and they didn't give anything to the daughter. So that's matching the Mishnah, that each of them can pass the case to the other. Each of them can pass it to others and say that path not go to my estate, but my neighbor, my other. But here the palm tree is part of their estate, because all the estates were together when the person left the will to give that palm tree to his daughter, and therefore everyone is obligated toward his will. So she claimed not from the heir, but from the original will of the father, and therefore she entitled. So people, the heir cannot send it to another one. Maita kante. So what's the solution in this case? So they said, guess what you have to do now? You have to give her the palm tree, and then you have to have a reevaluation of estate, and then you have to divide it again. Why? Because the original divisiveness of the estate was wrong, was invalid, because that included estate that not belonged to them and that belongs to the daughter. Hauda Amar Lehu, a person said before he passed, Dikla Livrat, one palm tree belonged to my daughter, Shachi v'shavik trei paraglet Dikla. But he left, in addition to a full palm tree, a half of palm tree. That he, meaning that it was a palm tree, but he was a partner with someone else. So since it's very hard to deal with partnership in this type of business, right? So the orphan figure out, since the father commit himself to what? To give the daughter a palm tree, let's give her the 2/2 in these 2 palm tree that he have a partner with this difficult person. So in that sense, they felt that that's the getaway with the father commitment. You mean to say that you call every half of palm tree a palm tree? So that's, oh no, אמר לרב מרדכי לרב אשי, אחי אמר אבי מארגוניה משמי דרבא. קרו אין של טריפה לדיקלה דיקלה. Yes, when it's come to a business, so the orphan can pick and choose whichever they wish. And Rashi said, ועל כורחה ידע לתחתונה שנכסים בחזקת היתומים וזו אינה באה עליהם אלא מכוח הצוואה. They said that all the estates belong to the orphan, and she come to the picture not because of the orphan but because of the will. So since the will, it's an included will, so then they can use the 2/2 to give it to her.
Boyachem leshuloim malachai yeshuloim malachai